All right. So we now have two restaurants, right? And we can work out in the console. We have a CLI app that will allow us to create restaurants. That's not what we are here for. We are on Rails now. We want to deploy the internet. We want to see pages, right? So, if you were in Sinatra, where would you go to start doing this? Let's go hands for this. Okay.
The application controller.
The controllers, yeah, the application controller.rb. So in this case, well, you have one, but you're seeing that this is like inheriting from something. I'm going to actually say one more different thing about Rails is Rails has a different controller for every model that we have. That's like usually the design practice. So application controller is what they're all going to inherit from, but if you're like building a, say, restaurant controller, we're going to have to actually generate that. So let's just Rails G controller. And now one thing I do want to talk about right now is I'm going to have to. This is one of the frustrating things about Rails at first. Wesley?
I'm going to ask you what file runs this, because you know in Sinatra would have been like config.ru.
So in this one, Rails actually gives us something. It's called Rails Server. And that's what starts your app. And we're going to get to that in a second. But Rails S or Rails Server will start your app. So I'm actually not sure where it's stored in like the Rails thing, like how Rails C and Rails S work. Rails Console and Rails Server are what you're going to be using. I think that's installed into your bash profile when you install Rails. And it does something. Who knows? But probably a whole lot of people don't know. I'm not one of them. But so right now, I'm going to do this Rails G. I'm actually going to step back for a second. Rails, this is the one annoying thing about Rails. It expects convention over configuration, so there's a few things that you're going to have to learn and just get familiar with. One of them is that it's very specific about how you pluralize things and when you pluralize things. So when you're generating a model, you're saying, hey, I'm generating a model called restaurant. So you're going to be using a singular restaurant. When you're generating a controller, you're generating a controller that handles multiple restaurants. So you're going to do Rails G restaurants. And another weird, annoying thing that Ruby will do for you and Rails will do for you is Rails will guess at what the proper pluralization is for something. So you can test this right here. You can be like restaurant dot pluralize, right? And you'll see that it pluralizes to restaurants. Can everyone see this right here? Cool. I'm going to like test out a couple. If you want to like settle the debate with your friend about whether it's octopi or octopode, you can be like, okay, Rails, what's octopus's plural? Octopi. Sorry. Yeah, if you have, but there's one like I think we'll all agree on. Like if you pluralize human, right? It's human. Cool. So keep in mind if you're using things that have weird pluralizations, something might happen. And just like when you're generating a model, remember you're generating a model called something. Like you're being like, hey, there's a class called restaurant. If you're generating a controller, you're saying, hey, there's going to be a whole bunch of like restaurants that you have to like be dealing with right here. So that's going to be a pluralized version. I know that stinks right now. But like what they'll do for you because you follow these conventions is a whole lot. When it comes to linking, when it comes to associations, you'll find more and more things that just like it'll provide for you. So, but that is one weird thing at the outset. Cool. So I'm just going to exit this, and now I'm going to be like Rails G controller restaurants. Cool. Great. And now I have this restaurants controller right here. That's cool, right? Basically, this allows us to Rails is built so that it can scale up really well. I have talked to my friends who are in production code, and like we'll jam and like work together, and he'll be like, and like my friend will be like, I'll be like, can I see your Rails code base? And like he'll be like, yeah, this is totally under NDA, but you can totally take a look. Am I recording right now? Because I just said that out loud. But basically, I'll be like, can I just click into your schema? And you know what? Y'all are familiar with the schema? So we currently have this schema right here. It's going to work the same way. You have this restaurant, right? Did I not delete students? I'm a fool. But basically, I'll be like, cool, can I see your schema? And it'll be like 90,000 lines long. Like you're dealing with like hundreds of models if you're like building a like full app. And so Rails is designed to scale up for that. And that means like doing things like separating your controllers. So it's not like you have to like go look through each controller to see what you're dealing with. So you're going to find a lot of separations of concerns. So that's why it's going to be doing things like this. And I know that sounds intimidating. Like eventually you'll just kind of, because Rails is so kind to you, you'll eventually know where things are. And when you start like learning good code design about like, hey, I want to separate my concerns, you'll find that it is fairly easy to make an app that doesn't hurt you. Okay, if we're now in a controller, and this is going to work kind of similar, how would you write this in Sinatra right in here? If we want to do an index file. We want to like show all restaurants. If we want to do that in Sinatra from this controller.
Isn't it get / index to and then URB index?
Cool. So I'm going to hash this out really quickly. So I promised you separations of concerns so that we can scale up. If you were building an app with like 150 different controllers, right? Or like 30 different controllers, would you worry that get / index being in one random controller might get difficult to find eventually? You would, right? So Rails actually does this slightly differently, and this is where we're going to be moving away from Sinatra. Also, after this lecture, feel free to just drop the Sinatra labs and go on to Rails. Cool? Because that's what we're going to be working on from now on. Does that sound good for everyone? After this lecture, feel free to just drop the Sinatra labs and go on to Rails. We might deploy 7 Cs after this, and that's going to involve doing Sinatra and Rails. But yes.
I'm really upset. Could you have said something like that like yesterday or something?
No, because I want you. We do want to teach you Sinatra, and also one thing I just want to like quickly say right now. Sinatra is a really helpful program. A lot of people, when they see Rails, are just like, wow, this is like an awesome program. Why would you ever use Sinatra? Sinatra is great for if you want to build a small app, right? Like if you don't want to like do all the separations of concerns, you want to do things like that. It's very similar to Express.js. It's just going to give you nothing out of the box, and you're going to have to choose what you want. You'll notice that like this get index, that's a route. So you notice that like we created a routes file earlier. What do you think that'll be used for?
The routes file holds all your routes. It's how you navigate.
Spot on. So I'm just going to hash this out so that we can see how it looks like Sinatra. We are going to go into this config file. And one thing I just want to say, this should probably go elsewhere in the lecture, but when you're in the app folder right here, anything like that works like shotgun. If you save it, then on a page refresh, it'll be updated. Once you start working outside of the app folder, you're going to have to restart your server when you do it. Cool? So I'm going to pull up this, I'm going to tell you right now that this routes file is in config. And this is like one of the most commonly used things outside of app that you're going to be using. Routes is something that you're going to be using no matter what your Rails program is. And you'll notice right here that because Ruby is just so not kind to you, it links you to the documentation on routing. So I'm going to open that up right now. And this is one of my favorite reads on the internet. I know that sounds really nerdy, but every time I open this, I find new helpers that it gives you. Rails routing from the outside in. And I'm just gonna like go through this, and we're gonna see if we can just with this. Can anyone read this? Can everyone read this? Take like 30 seconds, and then someone raise their hand and tell me what they think the code is going to be to get an index folder right here, to get to like an index route. Actually, I'm going to separate that into two things. What is the route that we want to go to see the index of all restaurants? What would we want to type into our URL? Wesley? /restaurants. Cool. Now, looking at this code, this like little example right here, if you want to like do a GET request to this using this code, can someone take a guess as to what the code would look like in our routes file to make a route to the index?
Get /restaurants,
Cool.
comma to index.
To just index?
To restaurants. What's that? That's hash.
Restaurants hash, yeah.
Restaurant hash index.
Cool. So you're saying, right, get to /restaurants. Whoops. I'm just going to copy and hash this out. Ooh, come on. Comma, 2. And then you said restaurants
Restaurants hash
index. Cool. So, this is correct. And I'm like, I want to just like go through it right now before we keep going on. And then I will prove to you that it's correct. Usually I'm going to like test it and be like, aha. But I actually just want to talk through this. Get /restaurants. What does everyone think that means? Go ahead.
When someone navigates to restaurants.
Yeah. When there is a GET request to the /restaurants path to, can anyone take a guess at what this is saying? I'll give you a hint. Remember what the hash meant when we were looking at our code in Mod 1? Does anyone remember what that is? Just it's an instance method? Yeah. So, Wesley, what big guess?
I was going to say, go to the ERB, next ERB.
That actually is not the answer I wanted. Weirdly correct, because Rails is very kind to you. It can mean that, but how I would read this, and I will show you. I will show you that later. Is if I get a GET request to /restaurants, go to the restaurants controller and run the method index. Does everyone get that? I'm going to go through that one more time because that's really important. This is how a custom route is built. This is the, if you get a GET request to /restaurants, it's going to go to restaurants controller, and it's going to run the index method. Wesley?
Can you go into the controller?
Yeah, totally. And now we're going to do something that now we're going to do the next step. If this is a method, I'm just going to do def index and end. And that's what these controller actions are going to look like. Cool? Matt?
That means that every ERB file we manipulate, we have to match it, the name of that file to a method in the controller.
Almost. It will. I'm going to say it would be helpful for that. This is like, there will be code that goes inside of here.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this is how you're going to write your controller actions right here. You're just going to call def index in the right controller, and then right here, you're going to say here, to restaurants hash index. Now I'm going to show you a different way in a second, but this is how you build a route. Like, this is the basic way to build a route. And remember, when you open up your route, there's a URL that you can just copy and paste from if you forget the formatting. So Rails is really friendly like that. Now, the next step though, is we're here. And at this point, I actually just I'm going to run Rails start, or Rails server. And let's try to go here. Cool. Restaurants controller hash index is missing a template for request formats text/HTML. We just went to the restaurants action, right? We built a route that said, hey, we are going to be building, we are going to have a restaurants method that, or we're going to have an index method in the restaurants controller that we'll go to when we get this URL. Now, what does this mean? Can anyone take a guess?
So usually when you build a route, you have to attach a ERB file, which is HTML. And so because we don't have HTML there, it doesn't have much display.
Spot on. It's missing a template for request formats for text/HTML. We're getting it, that format for text.html, there's also a way to request JSON data that you will not learn until month 3. And that we will not be building our apps to be like capable of handling, ideally, until we get to month 3. But saying, hey, they're trying to see an HTML version of this page, and I'm not seeing a view here. Rails error messages are actually really kind. And it'll actually explain here, unless told otherwise, Rails expects an action to render a template with the same name, contained in a folder named after its controller. Right? Now, it also says like, hey, like if you don't have a view here, it'll like, if you want to serve 204, that's fine. If you run this in production code right now, it'll just serve you a blank page. But let's go back. How do you think we can change this? If it says Rails expects an action to render a template with the same name contained in a folder named after its controller. What's up?
Go to the index method and the ERB index.
So I'm going to actually just say render index, but yeah, it's going to be this. It's going to be the same. Now, what are we missing here? Do you want to just refresh really quickly and test that out? So we're getting a slightly different error. Now it's saying, hey, you said render index. We're missing template restaurant/index.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Because this is automatically going to look in our views to see if we have an index file in our views.
Yeah.
If we put render index or whatever file we have, it's automatically going to know where to look to see if we actually have an ERB index file.
Yeah, it seems to be like that's what this is saying. It's missing a template restaurants folder /index, right? I'm going to show what that means. How are we feeling? Cool? So we can go to this views right here, right? And you'll see that we have this, when we generated a controller, it created this folder called restaurants in our views. That probably means it expects those two things to be paired. So now, it says, we're looking for a template called restaurant/index. And I'm going to just call index.html.erb or index.erb, it's the same. And now, right here, I'm just going to h1 hello world. Let's see what happens. What do you think will happen right now?
It's gonna say hello world, but it's not gonna show the restaurants.
Cool. So we just did a whole lot here, right? We built a route for index, right? That I will show it right now. We built a route, get/restaurants, go to restaurant/index. We went to this restaurant controller and we said render an index page. And then we built an index page that has hello world on it. Now, want to see something cool? Rails is actually really smart. And if you go to a controller action and you don't have anything here, I'm just going to comment this out. This still works. It's going to be like, oh, there's this def index right here. And I'm going to just like go on to its index page right now because like you've got a restaurant/index. You've got restaurants with an index method. Cool. I'm going to go right into this view folder. I'm going to go into the view folder. I didn't have this open. I was really hoping to like walk over there and be able to point to it. So I'm just going to use my mouse to point. So it's going to go over to this restaurants folder because you don't have a render. And it's going to look for something called index, right? Now, this right here is called implicit rendering, and this is totally fine. You do not need to include a render hash index. If you know what it's doing, that's fine. I wouldn't recommend you do this next step. I believe this will still work. You commented out all together. It's just going to be like, well, I saw a restaurant's route with an index. I might as well go, like, it just from the routes is smart enough to go all the way to the restaurant's hash index view. Don't do that part. You are allowed to implicitly render with a controller action. You are allowed to do this too. I will, like, anyone grading your code challenge will be confused. Anyone who's looking at your app in like production level code will be confused. Put a controller action there. But Rails is smart enough that you don't necessarily need to. Cool. What's up?
Kind of a tangent, but
Mhm.
what is the difference between render and ERB? You said they're the same, but I assume there's
I believe render is just what you say instead of ERB in Rails. Yeah, undefined method ERB. Render is just what we're using. So just, like, that's one difference from Sinatra. You don't write ERB, you write render. Cool. How's everyone feeling? What was the most confusing part of that? Having on the horns.
Yeah, the fact that it can find the index explicitly is weird.
It is weird, right? Sure, which one?
restaurants.
We're in the restaurants controller right now.
Oh, no, not the, when you wrote these things,
Application.
Wait, routes?
No, I think you meant the index, like, you meant the
yeah,
mall.
the views, yeah.
So yeah, implicit rendering is complicated. You do not need to write implicit rendering at first. Feel free to be as explicit as you want. The important thing to know, though, right here, is that when you're in the restaurants controller, it's going to be looking in the restaurants view folder, right? So it's going to expect a folder called restaurants, and it's going to expect a view file, like an index.html.erb, where the name either matches what you're explicitly rendering here, or if it's gone, the name of the method. Do people get what I just said there?
How about if you change the name of the method when you render the
Cool. This, so I showed you that it would actually like be smart enough to see if it doesn't have a method, just go right to the render page, to the view page. So nothing will actually change if I call this def cheese. But that's not because it's finding this controller action. That's just because routes are smart enough to be like, oh, I couldn't find a controller action, so I'm just going to go to that same name view. Give me 1 second. And then the one thing that I do want to show though is then if I called this to restaurant/cheese, this still works in Hello World. Because basically when I called hash cheese, right? Then like it looked for a controller action, called cheese, and then it ran our explicit render hash index. Now if I then hash this out, suddenly we're back to an error. So usually the best practice is you name the route the same thing. You name the route the same thing as the method right here, or like the control action. Usually the suggestion is that you have like the hash right there reflect the controller method and have that also reflect the view. What's up?
You said before that inside the method, even if we don't have the render index, it will still get to that HTML.rb file. If we have a block before that in there, like a block doing stuff, do we still can do that? Like it will still do whatever we tell it to do, and then go and show that and search for that file by itself without the render?
Yeah, let's take a look. Did I leave something out? Hold up. All right, going back to our previous version, we don't have an implicit render right here. Like we hash this out. Cheese can still equal Batman, and it will still go to our index page. Oh, right. Make this in string. It'll still work. Tom.
So if you had two ERB files, you had index.erb and also cheese.erb, and you wrote, for the get section it says, restaurants to restaurants hash cheese. Like you don't write anything in the controller, it'll know to go to the cheese.erb view.
So you're saying in the routes you have
Like the implicit route, or the implicit going to the view, that'll happen based on the name of the ERB file.
Yeah, I would
to the route.
like earnestly just for your coding and to not confuse you, like always have a controller action.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to do it. I just want to understand what's going on with Rails.
I believe that if you do like def cheese, if like or like hash cheese, it will just go to a cheese view, to like the cheese.html.erb. I might be wrong about that. We can test that if we have time at the end. Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right, but so we now have this implicit render for a def index that will go to an index.html.erb. What do you think is the next step if we actually want to like start showing out our restaurants?
Maybe like add
Cool. What does this give us? If this were Sinatra, what would this give us? Yeah. Yeah, and what will allow us to do with it? You can use them in your view, right? Let's see. Take a look, see if this works. We're here. All right. Let's just use. First off, how would we in Sinatra or in any ERB file? How do we start using Ruby code?
With a ice cream quick.
Cool. So what do we want to do here? Let's say we just want to render the first restaurant's name right now.
And then we add restaurants.
just gonna put dot name. Cool. And you can actually, because it's active record, dot first is just a method you can use. And you were right. I did use 2 A's.
I have a
Cool.
question.
Yeah.
That, the way you wrote it is, that's because at restaurants already pulls all of the restaurants. So you would only need to put the dot first instead of dot all.
Yeah, because we right here did restaurants equals restaurant dot all.
Okay.
So that's how that works. But yeah, let's take a look. See if we can get the first restaurant's name. That would be In-N-Out, right? Boom, In-N-Out's right there. So the ERB files, they work the same way. You are not doing anything different, really. You can still use the Squiddy Boys. You can still build stuff out. That work? Cool. So, can someone tell me how to make a proper index page right here? We don't need to link it yet. But I'm going to do a little UL action.
Would you just iterate through each of the restaurants and list each one?
Cool. How would we do that?
Do in Squid, or sorry, in the ice cream cone, you'd write restaurants dot each do and the block restaurant, and then in a new line you would write the HTML for the list. You write the HTML thing first, yeah. And then within that you would write restaurant dot name.
Cool.
And
And-
then, yeah.
Cool. Let's take a look. Good Juts Grill, back here. Cool. Yeah, we're close. We're building stuff right now. This is back to things that you like. Sinatra. I think you know how to build this by now. We'll call this instead restaurants. And I usually do this to annoy Graham. I'll put this in marquee. Let's take a look how that works. Heck yeah. Okay, marquee tags, never use them. They've been deprecated since I was like building Neopets like shops in like 2002. Like most browsers will not use them. It will break, but I know my browser won't, and it's fun. But like if Graham sees you using it, he'll be like, "You take that off right now." What's up?
Could you marquee the list? I just want to see all of us are moving at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
How do you do it inside the list?
We can do it however we want. Marquee is already broken. There we go. What's up?
Can you customize the speed or the starting?
No, that get good at CSS or JavaScript. But that we have not been updating Marquee since I think like 1997 or something. But here we go. We can keep restaurants, but I think that's a little much. Okay, so let's build a show page, and then we're going to link these together, and then I'm running over. Is something in here afterwards? Do we know? Cool. Let's really quickly do a route right here for. Can someone guess what the route would be for a show page?
What are you doing in the show page?
Just we're showing an individual restaurant and all that data.
Oh.
It would be get quotes / restaurants to restaurant #show. Not sure.
/:/:1.
No. Not there. Comma 2. Yeah. Restaurant #show.
Okay.
But I'm not sure.
So when we're doing a regular show page, what do we want the route for that to be?
Get restaurant /show. I mean, Oh, it's single?
Yeah, because we're showing one restaurant.
It'll have to be colon ID.
Spot on. Does it look familiar to anybody? To perhaps something on line 6 that I copied from the documentation? Cool. So now what do we do if you've been like really following along? What's the next step here? Let's take a look. We'll do like restaurant/1. What does this say?
We don't have, we can't find it in the controller.
We can't find a show action, right? So what do we need to do?
Make a show method.
Cool. Do we know if something's in here after this?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Who likes it?
Do you think we should just push through?
They don't seem to be asking for the room, so.
Yep.
Yeah, I think bleeding over by 5-10 minutes is not.
Cool. So we've got this deaf show right here, right? What's the next step? Actually, let's just. We have this. Do you remember what this means?
We don't have a view.
Cool. So how do we solve that problem?
Create one, show that ERB.
Show that HTML down.
Cool. Should we just see what it does now? There we go. Just gonna be like, oh wait, this is not helpful. H1, restaurant. Cool. But ideally we want to see a specific restaurant. We want to see In-N-Out Burger. Actually, let's use Gertrude's Grill. Right here we want to see In-N-Out Burger, right here. So what do we need to do?
We have to make a method. Oh, I mean, we have to connect something in the show ERB file that'll spit out that ID of the instance of that restaurant that we're trying to see.
Cool. Does anyone remember how to do this in Sinatra?
Prom?
Params. Yeah. I remember yesterday, I think Graham had a good conversation about it. I'm just going to throw a bybug right here. Cool? So binding up pry. Usually when I'm doing anything complicated with routing, I just throw a bybug, right? So now I'm here, I'm in the show page after receiving a request, right? Now, could someone explain to me what params were in when we were in Sinatra?
It's a hash.
It's a hash? Yeah. What's a hash of what specifically? Key and line.
Yeah,
But yeah, but like, what data goes in it?
the ID.
Sure. So I'm going to be more specific here. Anything that appears in the URL's query string. So like we have that hash right now. We have a colon ID, but if we want to make it colon cheese, then I would be like cheese. Let's show you that, right? I'm going to exit. I'm going to go to routes. I'm going to make this. Look what I'm doing here. Instead of restaurants, I'm doing colon cheese. Or instead of colon ID, I'm doing colon cheese. Let's make another request. Go refresh. And then I'm going to call params right here. You'll see there's a couple of things that you're not familiar with, and you will become familiar with over the course of your time in Rails. You're going to see like there's this weird thing called like controller restaurants action show cheese 2 permitted false, right? But you'll notice what did it do for us?
Oh, it said cheese to the ID.
Yeah, it said cheese to 2 because why would it set cheese to 2?
Because you named the key, see?
Because we named the key cheese, and because in that place we put a 2, right? Param specifically refers to anything in the URL query string, like anything that's in the URL that you're expecting data from, and also if you're doing like a post request or a patch or something like that, anything in the body of that request, right? So basically params are for any data that you want to send over from the user, right? That's where you're going to store it. It's not the entirety of the request. If you want to see the entirety of a URL request, you can actually type in request, and you'll see there's a whole lot of stuff that shows up, right? This reflects the entirety of that HTTP request that we got. You can probably like look in here and you'll be able to find out what map I'm using. You'll be able to find things like that. But for now, when you're just getting information, you can just be params. It's the same as it was in Sinatra. Cool? Now, I'm going to switch this back to ID because cheese is not helpful to other developers who want to use my cool restaurant app. And I'm going to exit this, or I'm not. I'm going to exit this. I'm going to do this one more time. Cool. Params. We have this. All right. What code do we need to write instead of the spy bug to use this ID?
Ryan's old ID.
Like this?
Parentheses, colon ID.
Like this?
I think so.
Let's take a look in the buy bug. Why does it say given 1 expected 0 here?
Because it's looking at it like it's a method and we're calling ID as an argument.
Mhm.
Instead of, it should be the brackets, like array brackets.
Yeah, it's a good guess. Params, but you're spot on. Params is a hash. And because params is a hash, we can treat it like a hash, right? And when we get things from a hash in Ruby, we use brackets. So we have this ID of 2. What do we want to do with it? Do we want to just return 2 to our users?
You have these fine.
What specifically?
I'm not sure if it's set to a variable, but it should be restaurants dot all. Oh no, restaurants dot fine. And the params colon ID.
Cool. Let's take a look to see what that gives us in just the buy bug. We're still in the buy bug right here. And that's our best friend. And look, Gurjas Grill is back. Hey, that's what we want. All right. So, what do we have to do with this now? Go, keep going.
You should set it to a variable at restaurant, I guess. And then you can, if you want the name, you can do at restaurant dot name on there.
Sure. Yeah, we can. How do we do that in the view? Because I think this is actually perfect right now.
We need the squid, I think.
Cool. So you're saying that this is good to go?
I'm nervous.
You're okay. When I'm asking you questions here, this is your first time seeing Rails, so I'm not expecting you to be good at it. I'm legitimately asking because I'm like trying to just get to the point where a lot of this was trying to be designed intuitively. But yeah, so do you think this is good to go? We can go to the views now?
Could you scroll up a little?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Cool. Yeah, because we're doing implicit rendering. We have a show page, right? Cool. What can we do here to test this?
You go.
Yeah.
It would be the squid, and then it would be at restaurant dot name, I think.
Cool. Now let's actually, I'm going to make this the H1 because we know it's a restaurant. Cool. This is a better user experience. Cool. And I need to get out of this buy bug. Am I still in the buy bug? Nope. Oh, what's going on here? Boop. Great. There we go. Boom. Right here. All right, let's do this next part really quickly. We have. Do you all trust me? We can now do location founding. I can just be like. Cool. And I'm just gonna make this our show page for now. Location Queens, and we can assume that the rest of those things are things I could write out, but I don't want to.
You do that without p tags?
What?
You do that in HTML without p tags?
Yeah, I would recommend using a p tag if we were like to make like a good user experience. But now, the last thing I wanted to talk about before we go, the last thing I want to talk about is this right here. Would you want to visit this webpage? How do you know to get to Gurjot's-Grail? And how do you know how to get back to index? You'd have to like memorize the URL, assume I'm doing something rescuer, and then just test IDs, right? How would you link from here back to, if you were in Sinatra, how would you link from here back to the index?
You need the anchor and the key drop.
Like this?
I'm not sure what the link is though.
Someone want to take a guess?
It's like localhost something. I forgot the numbers.
Cool. Now, if we want to make it an index, the index for restaurants specifically.
We write the index.
Take a look. What did you run? Ah, right. I'm gonna make a little break here. I think that's, whoops. No route matches. Oh, but look, a bunch of cool routes. Wow, this is too helpful. You will notice something right here. There's no route matching get index. There is, however, this path right here.
Oh, just not restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Take a look to see if this works. Go back to index. Boom, we're here, right? But I actually hate this. I hate having to write an anchor tag that goes to a specific path. Want to take a guess as to why? If you were writing a really big code base where like a lot of things were happening, and suddenly you wanted to move a URL, how much of a pain in the ass would it be to find every href and make it go back to a certain thing, right? And also, this is ugly code, right? So I'm going to introduce you to another thing really quickly, and then we can break. We can hop back here, but basically I want, like, right now there's this thing right here called that you can always check out called Rails/info/routes. This is a tool you can use to see what routes you have available. And you see there's this helper thing right here, right? I'm going to talk about that right now. So it seems like it actually gave us this. But there's this thing right here called link to and that you can use in Rails. Did I lose internet? I lost the internet. Probably for good reason. Do you mind if we take a break and talk about links later?
Yeah.
Cool, because I also think that we need a break at this point. I would just speed run through it. Cool. That's it then. We'll like find a room and like schedule like 20 minutes to talk about links. Cool?
Yeah.